Okay, no echo now. Sorry, everyone. I thought I'd have my laptop next to me and I could work, but that's not working. All right. I'm not seeing everyone that signed up for the meeting, but let's go ahead and get started in the interest of time. I'm Terry Watson. I'm the policy advisor for Building Codes Division. And Selena Patterson, the manager for the e-permitting system, is also here. And Laura Burns, she is helping out today. So I wanted to go around and introduce everybody real quick. Is Lisa Gill here from Portland, City of Portland? There she is. Okay.
Yes, I am.
You brought two experts with you today, is that correct?
Don't tell them that they're experts, but
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. Yes, I have one that's on the meeting right now. Jim Sorensko is one of our senior electrical inspectors with the City of Portland Commercial Electrical. And if Elgin Rowland can make it, he is one of our senior mechanical inspectors with the commercial section as well. So he's actually at a pre-con meeting and he might join us from his car.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and then Randy from Deschutes County was also supposed to be joining us. Are you with us, Randy? Maybe he'll be joining us a little bit later. Is Matt from Clackamas? Oh, there's Matt.
I'm here. Hello.
Hi, good to see you again. Julie from PGE. I thought I saw her. Oh, looks like she had to step away. Julie's here. And Jonathan from City of Albany.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, good. Good to see you, Jonathan. Let's see. And Larry from Northwest Natural. Maybe he'll be joining us a little bit later. And I see that, is that John?
I'm here, sorry. I apologize.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, there you are. Okay.
Yep, apologize.
Larry, did you bring some others from Northwest Natural with you as well?
Yeah, there's two supervisors, that Brian Baker and Brett Corey. I'm not sure if they're online or not though.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. And we have, is it John Kelly?
Yes, I'm with Deschutes County.
Oh, okay. Are you here for Randy? Are you just joining with Randy?
I am joining with Randy. I'm one of the A-level electrical inspectors.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining today. Okay, well, we are excited to start the meeting today. So with that, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Selena.
Good morning, everybody. And if I'm hoping that Laura will be able to share the PowerPoint slides that we put together of the different processes that overlap between building departments and the utilities so that we can, I kind of view our role here today, or my role here is really just to facilitate a discussion between the utilities and local government about where the pain points are in that overlap.
Selena, just a second. It's going to take us a minute. So maybe we can chat, or you can share a little more about the process to get here, and I'm going to go help Laura find it. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I mean, we documented, we had some discussions previously, first with with PG and Northwest Natural, kind of talking through different processes where there is an intersection between city or county government and the utilities. And some of those overlaps actually were public works, right, or utility department overlaps. So we did some work to just identify the building department overlaps, since obviously this is a building codes division rulemaking, and we're really just focused on building department issues. So we documented that, and those are the slides that we're working on, are the different processes where there's, the green tag process, or the places where there are handoffs, or where one entity needs to notify another entity in order to do the next step in the process. And so we're just going to facilitate a discussion about where there are problems with that, and if there's anything that can be done in order to improve the process and kind of, stop those problems from happening, or find a better technical solution, potentially electronically, to be able to do that. And yay, here we go. Perfect timing. Here are our slides. And so we broke these down, and we had sent these out to folks, to the whole group, just to make sure. Oh, are we starting on the very first one?
This is the very first one, yes.
Okay. All right. So the first slide that we have up here is when there is a temporary power permit. And so we kind of outlined, the contractor applies for the temp service with the building department. They install the post and the temporary service. They're going to request an inspection on that. The building inspector approves it. The inspector applies a green tag, and then the contractor or the customer calls the utility to energize, and the utility energizes the project, and that's it. So with that process, does anybody from either the utility or for local government, do you have thoughts about places where there becomes a problem in this process, where there's a delay or where somebody doesn't get notified or where it doesn't go as smoothly as this PowerPoint would suggest?
Well, I can speak from our vantage point. This is Jonathan from the city of Albany. I don't think hearing from our customers, I don't think we have a huge pain point in the current process. I think obviously when we hear stuff, we need to get things going because of the amount of time that maybe the utility needs to get connected because of how busy they are also. But I don't think there's any huge pain points. I think the bigger issue or concern would be when we do go to promoting virtual inspections, because this is one that would potentially be an ideal situation for it, getting that notification or getting that green tag put on the service itself, so that way the customer's not delayed. I think that's the slightly more challenging part.
So one question I have potentially about the process is, would there be, so I know that through e-permitting in some of the jurisdictions, mostly actually in the eastern and southern part of the state, with some of the smaller local utilities, one of the things that we've done is on the final inspection report that's usually sent to the contractor and the customers, we've included all the fields that the utility needs to be able, the information that they need to be able to go ahead and energize a project, so that in those jurisdictions, the inspectors actually include the utility email when they are sending out the final and the approval inspection report to the customer, so that notice goes out. Is that something that would make sense to folks? Is that potentially a change that could help kind of, because here we have that step where the contractor or the customer needs to call the utility to energize, or is it important generally to keep that step in there?
I know from our vantage point, that's actually one of our suggestions was going to be to leverage the permit tracking systems to notify the utilities if they would be willing to do that, so that way they can be aware of it. And in reality, they may be able to energize quicker because often the linesmen are in the area and just swing by and take care of it versus having to go back into that area later. So it may actually be beneficial long term, and then it helps the customer. The other scenario that we had talked about was maybe doing something similar to the minor label program, but instead of it truly being a minor label, it's the service installer installs that label, and that way the utility knows. Basically, it's the authorization letter in a label instead of a actual letter itself. So there's some room, especially when it comes to the temporary poles. We're not looking at much because generally the licensed contractors already made up the thing. We've seen it multiple times. We're really verifying the grounds again.
I'd want to, so I heard you say something that I'm not actually seeing on this flow, which is that there's an authorization letter that has to go to the utility. So it's not just a matter of the customer calling the utility to energize. There's some additional, there's a form.
No, in rule. So if we can't, or if it's an emergency, they have the ability to, the signing supervisor can sign a BCD form that basically says they're taking responsibility for the install and to go ahead and energize it. And then basically we just look at it after it's been energized instead. So in theory, if the division and the board were on board with that type of approach, you could look at that approach for more of a ongoing practice for the connection, especially with the I'll say newer chiefs, because Keith's been there for a long time. What we physically look at is more of a visual inspection anyway, and on the meter side there's not a lot that we're physically looking at because the utility owns the majority of it. We're looking at the conductors coming back into the actual panel, which is then more our authority. So you could conceivably look at it without a huge risk to life for other people.
Okay, and we have a slide to talk about the emergency situation. We'll go more in depth on that. I wanted to go back. So on the utility end of things, so what I'm hearing is that, or at least Jonathan is saying, yeah, that's potentially something, the idea of the inspection report, being forwarded directly to the utility from the inspector after this visual inspection, the green tag has happened, might be an option. Do the utilities have a mechanism for receiving that email? And if so, like what basic information, I mean, we might have to look at that in depth further, would need to be on that. I guess the first question is, would that process work if the utility got an email of a final and an approved green tag inspection which had a permit number and a location on it and the approval? Is that enough to be able to energize? That's for PGE, right?
Julie was, is she available, Julie? I know she's in the meeting. Oh, wait a minute.
No, we aren't able to hear you, Julie.
Oh, no. Okay, she's going to log out and log back in.
Okay. So we'll give her a minute because again, I think they're the only ones who can really answer that question. So I'm going to ask Lisa Gill a question. I see you had the U of O backdrop there. Did you go to the track and field world championship at all?
I did not, because I'm saving my voice for the Oregon Georgia game.
Okay. Yeah. You have your priorities in line.
Right.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah, that was a pretty exciting event. I didn't go to it either, but it's pretty amazing that we had it here.
That is so amazing. And I had friends who have a condo down there. They live in California, and they came up for that, and we have a group chat, and they gave us like front row seat pictures and commentary. It was really neat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Nice.
Yeah, I haven't been to the new Hayward Field though. I haven't been there yet. I figured I would do that during football season.
When your voice is all rested and your everything is all in place.
Right.
Your ducks are all in a row.
Literally.
Right, exactly.
You able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I know right here in this process, we're still talking about temp power, but I met with staff the other day, and we were running up against a few challenges, and they're looking at changing the current process. So in the future state process, or as it stands today, there are contractors that are actually pulling our meter base, and they're making repairs in the homes. And we don't even often know what types of repairs are being done. And my question in this group was going to be, what types of repairs are require a permit? Does every type of repair require a permit, or just, certain types of work? Because then that is what triggers the inspection. And so what's happening today, and one of the things that we've started to look at, and why we're looking at improving the process, is that a customer will call, and or we will get notified because alarms will go off when a meter base is pulled. So the electrical contractor may or may not even contact PGE. The base is pulled, repairs are done, and our inspectors will go out there to say, okay, yes, the meter base was pulled, but then we're not being called back to reinstall. The electrical contractor will do it themselves. And then, we keep hounding for an inspection so that it can be tagged. And so we have quite a few of those out there today that have still not been inspected because we can't get the homeowner or the electrical contractor to do it, because either a permit was never pulled, or, we just can't get them to do it.
Oops. So Julie, I hear that we will discuss that, but can we first kind of like put, we've got this process and kind of this question that was documented. Would it be possible on the PG side of things, in terms of a request to energize for temporary power, is an email that has the information that you need? Again, the permit number, the location of it, and an approved inspection. Would that email that have it being sent by the inspector, would that be enough for you to be able to get it in the queue to energize?
Yes, as long as if the state is still requiring the re-energization form, then yes.
Well, again, this is not about an emergency form. This is just somebody pulled temp power permit, and the inspection approved on the building department side. They've applied the green tag. And so at that point, if the inspector sends an email with again, a permit number, a location, an owner's name, and the approved inspection, would that email be enough to get that temporary power energized, or do you need something from the contractor or the customer directly?
That should be enough, but I can confirm.
Okay, if that works, then that's a fairly simple process. And then Jonathan, we'll get back to your idea about the idea of the minor label type of tag on that. But one solution to this, potentially to expedite the process for the contractors and the customers, would be that if PG will check and make sure that an email, and what email box that would be to, or how that would be directed, and what information would be needed, right? So is it permit, is it owner name, because some people might need to change inspection reports in order to be able to satisfy that. And can we actually move to the next slide, Laura? Because I think the process is pretty similar for the next. So this is also just a new electrical service, and the process is pretty similar in that a contractor applies for the permit with the building department. Yes.
There's a question. Jim has a question.
Okay. What is that question?
It's Jim Sorensko, City of Portland. Hey, I was going to ask, does the utility have any intention of creating an app in the future? I've seen other utilities, and when I worked in Atlanta as an inspector, we had with Georgia Power, they created an app that was available to us, that when we approved something, there was a place where we could just log in to that app, put in the pertinent information, permit number, and then they received that, and then they just put it on a task list for their line crews to go out and do that stuff. It seemed like it worked pretty well once we got it up and running in Atlanta. And I was just curious to the fact, since we're kind of all moving electronically here, does the utility, either or natural gas or electric, have that in the future to look for something like that? Just out of curiosity.
So Julie, are you looking at is PG looking at an app along those lines? It looks like John then has a question after Julie. Yes.
Yeah, we had explored options. I mean, if I'd be curious to learn more about the app that this other utility was using, as we had explored options with trying to use Acela and partner with other municipalities that are using Acela currently. But since everyone is kind of using it very, it's very customized to their needs. We weren't able to gain the efficiencies in trying to purchase something like that. But that was the plan. That was the thought, was to try to create some efficiencies on both sides by sharing the data through this electronic platform. I will say that we're constantly looking at ways to improve. And so I will definitely take that back as a suggestion.
So a mobile app would be another way of, again, getting that notification to the utility. I mean, that also brings up, when you say Acela, that potentially, well, actually, John, why don't you go ahead? You have your hand up.
Yeah, that was one of my questions was when I was in Tillamook County, they were using the Acela app. The utility there was. Then the other thing is that how much are we gaining by having the inspector go through all the extra process of telling somebody that they are contacting the utility? In other words, are we saving, minutes, hours, days? What are we saving in doing that?
So I guess that would be a question, Julie. I mean, if you get an email from an inspector, that a green tag has been applied, as opposed to having the contractor or the customer. I mean, I would assume that sometimes the contractors or customers take time, and is that usually a phone call, or do you have an electronic mechanism that the contractors or the customers request energizing?
Believe it comes in various forms, phone calls, faxing the forms, or emailing.
Okay. So you take email, phone calls, or fax. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, well, a lot of us use a version of either the state system or, stole the state system and hosted ourselves, however that works. We have to remember there's a lot of jurisdictions that chose not to go with Acela also. So we definitely don't want to, we want to follow the concept of the bill itself, which is a compatible system, not relying solely on the state system, because, there are people that just went on board with Tyler's system and stuff like that. So, we want to be cautious of, focusing too much on Acela, but the permitting systems that we have to follow the state's model at some point, it has the ability to do something. And I think, to like John's point, that's the part I think we're trying to, in this work group, trying to focus on, is that future 2025 requirement, more than the boots in the field saving a few minutes right now. It's if we're not doing physical inspections, we're doing more virtual inspections due to staffing issues or remote issues. It's how do we accomplish what we're currently doing in a similar digital format.
I mean, I would think with remote inspections that just including on the email that you generally send to the contractor and the homeowner with the inspection results, including the utility, a generic utility email shouldn't actually be much in the way of an extra click. But go ahead, Matt.
I would agree. I mean, I don't know how much this is benefiting the customer if they're calling. I feel like it would be more applicable in an emergency situation where they're having the power restored, where it would really be a benefit. I think if it is just clicking email and sending it somewhere, it's great. I mean, it's easy for our inspectors to do, but going through a bunch of steps to set this up, I don't know that it's really, a great return on investment. So.
Selena, I would make one suggestion, especially for those that are on the state's hosted system, instead of making it so the inspector has to click it. Like we have an actual service and section, have it set up that the service and inspection actually automatically triggers it type situation. So that way it's an automatic email to the utility instead of, us manually doing it, having the standard model, having that option to configure it. We just plug in who our utility is.
So then that kind of gets to the point of like whether it would be, so when we're looking at rulemaking, would it be a reasonable thing to require that every jurisdiction either automates that email or sends it? But I'm hearing from folks that for the temp power and maybe for the regular electrical service, that it doesn't, that at least building officials don't feel, or you all in this group are not feeling that there's much savings to having the inspectors being the ones that notify the utilities. Julie, is that something that, do you have concurrence there in terms of that's not a, that doesn't make a difference? Or do you need something, is there something that the customers generally need to provide to you that they're not providing to you, that by having an inspection report would be helpful?
I think it's just more standardization right now, because we get the information from various, we either get it from the homeowner, we get it from the contractor. Having just more consistency on who it comes from would be great. But again, I'm going to see if I can ping someone to actually jump on this meeting with me, who might understand more that process better, understand the permitting side a little bit different. So I just want to make sure that I'm answering the questions correctly.
Okay. Jonathan?
So I think for that, the notification part that from the jurisdiction standpoint, it's the notification that we're talking about here is in lieu of the green tag. And I think that's the impetus of that, because right now they won't connect unless they have that green tag. And, not trying to throw Northwest Natural under the bus. Occasionally we've had overzealous installers that if they can't read the ink on the green tag anymore, they won't install. So we've had to run out there occasionally. But the end result is it's how are we getting that green tag in place for temporary, permanent. I know we started to move to the permanent ones. If we choose to go down that virtual inspection, or sadly, if the legislature says we're going to go to virtual inspections across the board. So how do we get that notification if the utilities still need it or want it at that point in time?
Okay. And I think I saw somebody else with their hand up.
I lowered it. Thank you.
Jim, did you have something additional?
No, I was just gonna, if the utilities had a dedicated mailbox that we all could send to, however, or whatever that is, we do generate some sort of paperwork that we now currently, as we went through COVID and stuff, started to email to the contractors. We could include them in that email. Here in Portland, we have an automated email system, but I'm sure there's a way we can figure out to possibly send that to the utility if they provided us with an email box. And the reason I brought up the app was we had the same problem. Was it was a delay because back then we didn't have all this email stuff, and so we were putting it on a piece of paper which got faxed to the utility every day to energize, and it just delayed those energizations. So I think it worked well and it was Georgia Power that created that app. It wasn't anything to do with an Excella, or here we use Amanda in Portland, or somebody else uses I4, or whoever else, whatever other system you're using for permitting and inspections. But if it's a generic app comes from the utility, then we all have access to that, however they do. I was just curious to see if there was something in the works, since we're all moving towards this electronic stuff, for them to put out for us to make it easier to get that information to them. But it was just really because I saw it work prior. It just seemed like a good idea.
Matt?
I was just going to say, as Jonathan was saying, if we're doing virtual inspections, that would be a great method. I like this idea of a minor label type that has a permit number that they can fill out and show that they have applied for that permit. But if we're going out there and doing live inspections, why not green tag it? I don't know that it really makes any difference at that point. But again, it might cut a few minutes out of the timeline is if we send the inspection report to PGE. But if somebody wants power right away, they're going to be calling as soon as that tag's installed and making those accommodations. So.
Okay, so it sounds like there's, from what kind of Jim said, potentially, I mean, I guess the one downside I would see to app would to the utility apps would be you'd probably have two different apps for PGE and for Northwest Natural versus if, either the existing process and you still have the contractors and the homeowner do it through either, a minor label type of, proof that it's been done or a, so wait, actually, let me go back to that. So is the suggestion here that a green tag inspection be a minor label inspection, like a temp power? I mean, but that would be that's a full electrical permit usually, right?
So especially on the temp power, let's go separate the two. So the temp power, with the expansion of the minor label program, 5 years ago now, theoretically, if it was actually, and this is where you'd get pushback, I think, from the general contractors, because the way it's currently set up, the electrical contractor sets up the temp pole that can be at their shop and anybody can install it, where if you did use the minor label in theory, then it likely would have to be the actual electrical contractor installing it instead of the general could install it. So that may get some pushback from that vantage point. But the reality of it is, I don't, for a temporary power pole for construction, there wouldn't be a physical reason why you couldn't switch it over to a minor label. There, a 5-minute inspection, verify, everything's still in decent shape, and then the grounding's there. So, theoretically you could do it. The idea that I mentioned and then Matt got on board with was not necessarily replacing it and putting it in a minor label program, but setting it up similar to a label system like the minor label program, where the signing supervisor for the electrical contractor has a logo that shows the utility that this one was a virtual inspection. So that way the utility knows they're not seeing our green tags because we didn't physically inspect it in person. We did it virtually. So if there's any questions from the linesman, they know up front, versus there's not a green tag. Is this one, or we just haven't been there yet?
Okay, so you're saying more, so if I understand correctly, both you and Matt are kind of saying that these would be not so much a minor label, but a type of inspection that would be appropriate for video inspection, for a virtual inspection type of thing. Okay, which Correct. Then again, you could still, and especially if we get to regular power, that still gets back to so the tag would be a mechanism of letting the utility know that it had been approved. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, as opposed to the emailing of an inspection report or some other basis of it, because the utility needs to know that there was an approval before they can go ahead and energize. And so usually the customer is faxing an approved inspection report currently in order to get the utility to energize, or Julie, what happens when somebody calls in? What type of proof does the customer have to provide to the utility that there's been an approval?
Pixie, do you want to take that?
Yes, yes, I will. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for letting me join. My name is Pixie. I'm with Portland General Electric. And the process today is we either need to see the sticker that is on the meter or the meter base to show proof, or we require our customers or electricians to provide a waiver that shows the permit number and has all of the information. We have a form that the form that they fill out that has all of the information, including premise number, meter, their address, customer, electrician's license number, permit number. And that's what we really need to have before we energize.
So for a temp power pole, if somebody calls in and says, we're ready to energize, then somebody on the phone is going to say, well, we need you to provide a form that provides all that information that you just said, and they then have to email it or fax it to you to
Correct.
have that. Okay.
Correct.
And so or if they're a knowledgeable contractor, they will just email that form in or fax that form in. And then once you receive one of those forms, you don't need anything additional from the customer. You just put that into the queue for being energized.
Correct. And typically what happens that depending on what type we're talking about, my experience is really more on customer side repairs. However, we usually we have in certain situations, we do set things up ahead of time, but for scheduling purposes, because we're challenged with scheduling. But if we do not have that inspection done per what we're told are requirements, then we have to go back. We can't energize them. So that becomes problematic.
So sometimes people might request to energize and they give you all the permit number, they give you all that stuff. And then, but how do you know that there's not been, you are also requiring that they provide a final inspection report?
As long as they have had an inspection done. I mean, we do have times where we do where we're using the emergency waivers, and we have customers that use that quite often, especially after hours, just so that they can get energized. And so the problem we have, with that is we want our customers to have power, but oftentimes it's just timing. And that could be for a variety of different reasons. It could be due to resource constraints with the municipality. It could be that the electrician or the customer didn't know to call the municipality to get inspections. So there's a variety of reasons. So it really put us in a predicament because we want our customers to have power, but we also want to make sure that we're following the process.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, so again, we're kind of first like on just like a temp power pole. Does the contractor or the homeowner need to provide you with an inspection report in order for you to be able to energize? What is it that you would need just on it, not an emergency type of thing, but just like temp power placement?
Yeah, and for the temp, to be honest, I am only working on the customer repair side. So if we're talking about a contractor, I don't think I'm the right person to answer the question for that. So Julie, maybe we can find somebody who could answer that. My expertise is around when repairs need to be done in the home with the customer and what we're running up against to there. So maybe we can find somebody that can answer that question for you around a temp pole. And I'm guessing this is for new construction is what you guys are asking for.
Yeah, all right. So how about after the meeting, if somebody from PGE could kind of confirm what it is. So, and maybe there's two things that can be confirmed. One is, are you requiring an inspection report, or what type of proof of an inspection are you currently requiring? Would a sticker from the jurisdiction that is placed on the temp power pole be adequate, so the customers would come in and put a result, and when you get out there to energize, would a sticker be adequate, or would you need to receive the sticker number? Or again, so what can the what are your requirements on that end of things in terms of notice and what you need to have in order to energize that temp power?
Okay, all right. Okay. We'll get that back to you. Thank you.
Okay,
I'll follow
great.
up on that, Selena.
Okay. Then let's take a look then at I think that, so I'm hearing from, I think what we, from local jurisdictions, we're hearing about potentially the idea of maybe emailing or maybe just continuing to leave that with the contractor and the customers, but maybe providing the inspection a sticker or something to that effect on the inspection, or some kind of proof of a virtual inspection as a way of verifying that. But it sounds like we need from probably PGE some further confirmation of what the requirements are before they can energize that power, in terms of what types of notice they need from the customers. So let's take a look then at a new service. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to suggest also, I'm sure you guys already reached out, but especially in that question, you might want to reach out to Pacific Power again, because they seem to be rather particular at times. So.
Okay, perfect. So maybe we can get the answer from PGE, and any other additional questions that come up, or anything that we also kind of come up with as ideas for this in this process. We could also certainly vet with any additional utilities like Pacific Power. So, okay, Laura, can we look at the slide for, thank you. So here we have a new electrical service, and this one has basically 2 stops. Let's see, we also have John Kelly. If we, let me take a look at that. John says, if we had a contractor added permit, would not the power provider have to look for an approved inspection also? A contractor added permit, would not the power provider have to look for approved inspection also? You mean if the contractor put on kind of like a tag type of thing from a video inspection or something, wouldn't they still have to look for it? Yes, I would think so. Yeah. So here for a new electrical service, it looks like there are 2 touch points for the utility on this, and 1 for the building department. So in this, so there's the contractor applies for a new service permit with the building department, and simultaneously the contractor or the customer needs to be working with the utility on the location of the meter on the site. And so is there, I guess, in that step, when there's an application for a new service permit with the building department for the installation, and the utility needs to coordinate, is there some kind of communication that happens between building departments and utilities in this step? Does the building, you and the building department, do you confirm or need to confirm with the utility, or need some kind of notice from the utility that they have already just approved the location, or what? Anybody with insight on this step here?
No, generally we're not involved in that process, especially for, things that don't require plan review. Once we get into the plan review stage of electrical stuff, usually that's already been worked out with the utility and the signing supervisor or the electrical engineer, showing us where they're planning to put stuff.
So is there something on the site that lets you know, like when you go out to do the inspection of the new service, is there something that lets you know that the utility has approved that location? Or are you just, because it's been installed, you're assuming that the contractor has done their due diligence with the utility?
Sadly, it is. They did their due diligence. Quite often, like when we get to the gas side, Northwest Natural's been out there if it's a new line set, and you can see their yellow mark on the ground where they're going to put the meter. But yeah, for power, generally, we don't know.
Okay. PGE or Julie or Pixie, is there, so I think this was raised by you all, that sometimes people don't actually do the consultation. Is there anything, how do you find that out? And then what's the repercussions? And is there do you have thoughts on how that gets fixed? I'm not sure how. I think that's probably on the contractor, but what are your thoughts on that?
Julie, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but typically today we require the contractor, or at least my understanding is that we require the contractor and or who's working with the customer to provide that information and follow up. That's typically what we require. And we tell them, hey, you need to go through your municipality, or you need to go through, this process before we can come back and do our work.
So basically we're, in this case, we're in terms of that location of the meter, if they don't do that consultation with the utility and they install, pretty much it's on them to have to deal with whatever rework there needs to be with the utility.
That's correct. And sometimes we don't know that they've done the work. I mean, we can tell from our system that work has been performed, but basically, and this is where it gets hard because, but yes, it's really on the customer. However, if it is PGE equipment or a PGE meter, I mean, ultimately where we struggle with is that ultimately it's our asset and it's a liability to PGE. So, but the customer, we may ask the customer to rework it because it may not pass our inspection process, and we do have that happen.
Okay. But it sounds like that we're not attempting to fix that in any way with this system. That's really on the contractors to do. I mean, they're the ones that are going to pay the price of having to rework it if they didn't do the work they should have done up front with the utility.
That's correct. And if we get out there and we say, no, this isn't correct, this doesn't pass our inspection, you need to redo this, then that falls to the homeowner or the owner and the contractor to perform those fixes.
Okay, then so then it looks like then in the new electrical service permit process, we pretty much have the same process that we have with the temp thing, and that the real handoff that happens really is when the green tag is applied after there's been a final approved inspection of the electrical service, and the contractor or the customer calls the utility. So whatever process we worked out for temp power would be appropriate for this process as well. Our folks generally see that the same. Anybody see any issues with thinking of that differently?
No, Selena, I had a question about when you complete this, will there be, what is the plan, I guess, to communicate to like the contractors on this new process?
You mean when the green tag has been approved?
No, it looks like you're reviewing like the current processes and or so changing the behaviors of how some of the contractors do things today so that we can get to this state.
Changing what are you thinking about?
Well, I'm just saying, is there going to be like an education awareness, like, things that are being sent to contractors to make them aware that they need to be following these rules, and or like these are the potential things that are going to continue to happen because municipalities or electrical or utilities are saying we can't continue to do this.
Selena, is it okay if I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So Julie, I think this is we're just one piece of the puzzle here, and this is a longer process that comes from the entire bill. So we're looking at the utilities piece right now. And later on, towards the end of the meeting, we're going to have a wrap up and talk about what we're going to do. And then we'll bring the entire rack back together in September. So this is a longer conversation. We're just looking at the utilities and the building departments right now, having this conversation. And as we roll this entire process out, we're going to have outreach and communication as the rules are changing. Is that correct, Selena?
That is, I mean, but I think, and so potentially depending, thus far, I think what we've discussed there isn't necessarily, we're kind of looking at, is there, is an email solution, is there a change in the communication? And then that might be rolled into what does a building department electronic system need to look like by 2025, if some of that communication piece needs to be part of such a system. But mostly we're also just kind of highlighting it. I mean, so back to your question, in terms of something like what the contractor needs to do with the utility, I think that's actually more of a utility communicating to the customer type of thing versus a building department, right? If the contractor needs to be coordinating with you on the location, that might be something we could give a reminder of if we're doing reminders about other types of rules that come with this. But that, I don't know that is in the purview of the building department, the building department to be telling the contractors per se. So let's actually move on to the next slide, which has to do, which I think gets more to some of the things that Julie and Pixie were raising about the types of work that need permits and the forms to energize the emergency electrical repair permit process. So let's go back, Julie, what you raised earlier, a question about that sometimes people were doing work that was moving the meter, and you guys were getting kind of energized or getting notices about that, or getting, becoming aware of that, and then not finding that permits were not pulled. Do you want to talk a little bit more?
Yeah, that's essentially it. We get notified. So if the meter base is moved, the alarms start tripping, and so it may trigger someone to come out there to check on like what is going on, what happened with the meter base. And we'll often find that, repairs or something was done, but we don't know exactly what that was, because either a permit wasn't pulled, and we weren't notified. And so I'm trying to also understand, like, in what cases would a contractor, I guess, need to have a permit? Like what does the municipality, I guess, deem a repair is need, or a permit is needed for this type of repair, or is it just for replacements that a permit is needed?
Does one of the building officials want to take that question?
I guess I can. So for the most part, there's very few repairs, quote unquote, that can be done without a permit that would necessarily need to have your meter pulled. If they're needing to pull the meter, probably 99%, 95% of the times they would have needed a permit. Probably the very rare time would be, the old banjo style, or where they don't have a true main disconnect for the panel itself. So, and then they're needing to do some alterations on the panel, that could be considered a repair. But for the most part, yeah, they're going to need a permit. It's more somebody got overzealous, decided to pull your meter before they got the permit, or what sadly we see is, quite often the contractor will be there to do the work, or to do the bid, decide to start doing the work, and then apply for the permit over the night, and then want to get the inspection the next morning type thing. So sometimes you'll see that type of stuff.
Matt, did you have anything additional to add to that?
No, I agree with Jonathan. I think 99%, if they're doing anything with the meter, it's going to require a permit.
But currently, so just moving the meter in Julie, when you're getting those kinds of alarms because it's moved, that isn't necessarily an occasion where you're gonna need to re-energize, or what is it that you need to know that the work being done was correctly permitted? Or so what is it that you're looking for when you get that kind of alarm going off?
Well, we would need to know that it is inspected. So if the partners here are saying that 99% of the time, if they're moving the meter base, then obviously whatever work they were doing requires then a permit and an inspection. that's then ideally what we would like to do, because we want to make sure that whatever work was done properly and it's safely. And so when we're re-energizing that, we're doing that safely so that we're not liable in case something does happen. But if the contractor is taking it upon themselves to put that base back on, they're re-energized once they put it back on.
So currently you're not being notified. Do you, as a utility, have requirements that the contractors notify you when they're doing that?
We do.
Okay.
We do, because they're really not allowed to touch our equipment.
So
Julie, can I pipe in for just a minute?
Yeah.
So we probably, I don't know what the exact number is, but probably 50% of the time we are not notified when someone pulls a meter. And so we get alarms all day long, every day from and we don't have currently, the challenge we have is we don't have enough resources to send them out to all of these jobs or all these alarms and a lot of the time it's an electrician that has pulled the meter. And today, of course, we do allow that, which is part of the process that we're going to change. But trying to enforce that is tricky, because we have to communicate to them that the expectations. And again, the other biggest challenge we have again is if we are required to have inspections by the municipalities before we can inspect and reseal the meter. If we change the process, our customers will be out of power longer, which in some ways will force their hand, to get those permits and to follow the process the correct way. But our customer experience, of course, will tank because of these requirements. And of course, it's something they should be doing anyway, and they're not. So I just wanted to share with you, what we're seeing, what our challenges are.
So most often when you get these alarms and you go and the contractor, are you saying that half the time the contractor doesn't have a permit or doesn't really just hasn't,
I don't know if it's 50% of the time, because we struggle with that number, but they have already just pulled and said, oh yeah, well, I'll get a permit. Some of them may have gotten a permit, but there's times when we have to go and investigate. And then when we come back, they say that they got a permit, but there's no sticker there. And so then we're trying to figure out, well, do you have the permit number? Do we have the resources to go? We really shouldn't have to go and look to see if we can find the permit information. They should be providing that to us. But we do have some that do not pull a permit. They don't think they have to. They don't understand why they need to. Or they just, so we are challenged that way, because, we know that we need to follow the process. And then they're asking us to re-energize. So they'll pull out an emergency waiver. So we have both those scenarios that you're talking about.
So currently, if somebody hasn't pulled the permit and they need to re-energize, they will often then grab the emergency waiver as a process and take responsibility.
That's correct. That's correct. And then the other challenge, which I don't know if Julie has mentioned, but we're being told that there's many resource constraints at the municipality inspection level. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. And that creates a whole nother challenge for us.
Meaning that they may have pulled a permit, but the inspection might not have occurred yet when you get that request to energize?
Correct.
Okay.
And so there's the potential for, a higher level of emergency waivers, and we don't know if that's something that we can accept, or if that's okay, or, what we're responsible for in order to re-energize.
Thoughts from the building officials on this?
So the next slide, when we talk about the second option for the emergency installation, so that's the contractor's right. So yes, by rule, we have to respond within a period of time. So generally 72 hours for most of the trades that are outside of regular structural stuff to actually be able to service. So there are times, we're fortunate we're not a small jurisdiction, but we're a small geographical jurisdiction and have, a level on site. So it's easier to get out there to do things most days. But even when there's vacations, yeah, we've had to punt a day or so for people. If you're a rural jurisdiction specifically, I happen to have had a piece of property in Lake County, and you got your inspections on Thursday. You wanted service inspection, it was Thursday. That was their day. So yeah, there is definitely times that there is limitations from a jurisdictional standpoint. And by rule and statute, we have the ability, the contractor has the ability to use that authorization form that it's, and on that next slide, it basically says we approve the authorization form. That's not actually the way the rule's set up. They actually get to use that. It's not our choice. So they use it as long as the signing supervisor takes responsibility for it. Because they saw that need that we may not be able to be responsive. They may need to do an emergency repair at night, and we want to get people in, have their AC or whatever is happening, like during the heat wave.
So and here's that next slide that talks about the, again, the contractor filling out that form. And then the next step in the process is that the building department approves that and before the utility energizes. So again, is that a place? So PG or, Julie and Pixie, do you get those approvals for the contractors from the building department, the approved forms generally, or has that been a problem where things have fallen down and you're just getting the form?
So Selena, just to clarify, we don't get to approve it. So it's a BCD form that they should be using. And on the form, the contractor just has a checkbox to say that they have notified the building department that they use.
So it's just a notification. So there's a mistake on this slide. So this is building department receives notification, right? And then as long as that, and do you generally receive those notifications?
Not often. Quite often we're failing the service inspection, because often the electrical contractor, when we see them, will get the send in the notification to the utility, and then we go out to the service the next day, which is what generally happens. And it's energized, doesn't have the green tag, so then we fail them, saying provide the authorization letter.
Okay, so you have a mechanism for dealing with it when you're not actually getting the notifications. They get a failure on that and have to remedy.
Yeah, and then we remind them what the rule says is they have to give us the letter.
Okay.
We're not supposed to be asking for it.
So this is
Okay.
Pixie. Can I ask for clarification? Because I appreciate your explanation there. So, and again, I don't know if this is based on the jurisdiction, but we have supposedly, and this is what I heard. So when we receive the emergency waiver, we hold those on file. However, what I've been hearing from our service department is that some of the jurisdictions say that this is what they said, that they don't want them, or that they don't require them to send them into the jurisdiction anymore. So I guess I want clarification around, is it the responsibility of the contractor to send a copy of that emergency waiver to the jurisdiction as well as and to provide to the utility, or is it the utility's responsibility to send that information to the appropriate jurisdiction?
No, I don't think it's the utility department's requirement. I think it's the contractor's requirement. Correct.
Correct. It is
Yeah.
it's the supervising electrician's responsibility to notify us, and then the way the rules are written, basically, they can get through a penalty process if they choose not to do that.
Okay, so if we've already energized them and resealed the meter, is there anything else that we have to do as a utility if we pass them and you fail them?
Not as long as the installation still works. It was more of a matter of just getting the form. Obviously, if for some reason they undersized the service conductors or something like that, and we need them to replace them, then or using the new NEC requirements of basically back-to-back meter to the panel itself without having a disconnect. If they have to redo that, then obviously you guys would have to pull the meter and fix the issues.
Okay, thank you very much.
So it seems like, so is there anything that folks can see in this process of the forms that should be done electronically? Is this something where it would be helpful if the form, in terms of the receipt from building departments, where are you all receiving those? Or is that you generally an email box that, that the supervising electricians scan and send that form into an email box?
We've had it on site to where we scan it and attach it to the permit. They also can have the option to do that also, attach it in the electronic version of what they're using.
Okay, so this can be done in person, or it certainly can be done through an email or an upload of a document to a permit.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so it sounds like we don't have anything particularly broken on this process here, or do we? I mean, so again, is there something else that it sounds like sometimes we have problems with people not having done the notification that they needed to do, but the mechanism for dealing with that is basically a failure and a reminder of what the requirements are for doing this process. Is there anything that folks see that should be done differently, that could be done electronically, or a communication thing, or anything, any concerns about this process?
Sounds like there's just needs to be a little bit more education for the contractors and potentially the utility companies also, as far as what they can do with or without a permit, or with a letter or without a letter.
Yeah, that may be the case of just kind of a periodic reminder of continuing education of what triggers this, and again the utilities requirements, and the fact that those alarms are going to go off, and so you need to have been pulling those permits. Anything additional to cover on this? Any additional? So I think this was the last one on the electrical side of things. Before we move over into natural gas, is there anything from PGE or anything from anybody about electrical handoffs between the utilities and the building departments or contractors?
Julie, do you have anything?
Sorry, my audio has been hard this morning. No, I don't have anything additional.
Okay. I just wanted to share, thank you very much for this. I do think, and I talked to Julie about this earlier, and I know it can't always be, but I don't know if you guys are moving towards a standardization across the board from a resource perspective. If codes are different, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, it becomes very convoluted and challenging from a business perspective, and I'm sure from a contractor perspective. And then the second thing is, from what I understand, there is a site potentially where where we could access information where permits have been pulled, you know, because our resources, like everyone else, are at a premium. The challenge we have is we can't go to every alarm that goes off. And so if there's an easier way for us to be able to pull who has pulled permits in our service territory across, you know, that would be extremely handy and helpful.
Well, that's certainly something, I mean, so on for e-permitting jurisdictions and many of the other non-e-permitting jurisdictions, and certainly going forward, I think as we look at 2025, I would think that one of the things potentially is that everybody has a searchable database where a utility could come in and just search an address and find out if a permit has been pulled. And I think that's certainly something worthwhile considering as we look towards 2025. So, Jonathan?
Not really in this process, but we brought it up earlier on the communication, but especially on the context of locating the services and stuff like that. Since we're talking about electrical, I'll throw a prop to Northwest Natural. They did a really nice job of coming up with utility requirements for placing the meters and stuff like that. You know, while the building department's really here for the building code aspect, we end up trying to coach and help our customers, especially the homeowner contractors and stuff like that, that really need stuff. So the utility providers on, especially the electrical side, if you guys have specific install type requirements that you have in a brochure and want to get to your building departments, that's always a great thing. We'd much rather hand that to the customer while they're getting their permit or making it a link on our website and stuff like that. So that way, when we get out there, we don't have to be like, I don't think that's going to work for you. You need to talk to your utility and approve it, because it means building code knowing that it's not going to work. You know, we always like to be as proactive for our customers as possible.
And
that's something, oh, sorry, yeah, and that's also something on the e-permitting side of things. We'd be also happy to put it on the e-permitting website for all the jurisdictions that participate in e-permitting. That would be one place to have the link as well. So
that's awesome. So that would be like our electrical service requirements.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. With that, let's move on to the next slide, which I think is, there we go. So I think the process with gas permitting is fairly similar to what we have with electrical permitting. So we have the contractor applies for a gas piping permit with the building department. The contractor installs the pipes and stud for the meter. Building inspector approves, applies the green tag. And again, then the gas utility can come out and install the meter and start the gas. So again, with this process, are we having problems with the, so for Northwest Natural, how are you receiving, when you receive that request, what information are you needing? And are you generally getting that from the contractor or the homeowners that green tag has been applied? And how do you receive those notifications?
Basically, this is Larry McCann from Northwest Natural. My other two counterparts dropped off, I believe. That usually we get a work order that goes into our work management system from our customer acquisition that it's ready for a meter installation. And so we go out there with the hopes that a green tag will be affixed with the date, address, pressure, and the inspector initials. And then it depends if it's standard pressure. You know, it's 10 pounds. There's two check boxes: standard pressure, 10 pounds for 15-minute test versus 2 pounds for 60 pound 30-minute test. So the other piece too is depends also if there's a two-part gas piping system. So like there's a inside or there's a portion of it underground, and there's separate tests for those. So we'll look to see if those tests have been completed as well. So really, when we get on site, there's a couple things that'll happen. If the air test is approved and documented accordingly to our process and our protocols, then we'll leave the meter activated, and if it's new construction, and on at the customer valve. So now if it's an idle service set, right? So we're going back out there, there's a service, past existing service, and maybe there's an upgrade to the equipment, or it's been a delinquent account for a while. and then the meter had been removed and then new equipment's been installed, or what we'll do is we'll want to go in and make sure that we fire up that equipment. So we'll need access to that equipment. So that's a little different on that side too. Now we do have our contractor, Lloyd Clark, that they actually and follow the same process. They won't do the light ups, but they do new construction, and they'll look for that green tag information themselves to set that meter, and they'll leave it off at the customer valve. They'll leave the meter on, but off at the customer valve, and for a contractor to come in and light everything up. So pretty similar on that aspect as well. So that's kind of our process. And I will be honest, sometimes we don't see a green tag there either. So we know we're not going to turn the meter on, and we're not going to pressurize the system. We're actually going to leave the meter off and padlocked. So you can't even turn it. We'll have a customer valve on there, but it won't matter because the gas service from the service line itself will be off. So
it
there's a lot
sounds
of
like
information. So
it sounds so this is a little bit different in that because the inspectors are applying this green tag, there's a physical thing on site. So on the building department side of things, is this something that, that again, you would think would be something appropriate for a video inspection, and therefore the green tag would be a difficult process to have? Or is this process working well for everybody and we don't need to fix it? Or
Well, for us, for the city of Albany, it's the same process we were just talking about, the green tag for the electrical. So if we choose to or are mandated to do video and virtual inspections for this type of subject matter, the reality is if we can get through to especially Northwest Natural or Cascade in the eastern side through a notification process, and that works for them, it eliminates that potential, because really that tag is for the notification for them. It doesn't, it's not our need.
Yeah, I agree. I agree too. I think it's just that I think this is definitely doable. I think it can streamline things. It's really, like you said, it's that notification process. How does that come through? And there's a couple other caveats, like I said, like if there's more than one service line, one's underground and there's an existing one running through the building itself, type of thing. But but it's really, how does that notification process come through? Is it an app? I heard the app mentioned. Is it a portal that we get into to check? For us, it would be probably a business process. Is it behind the scenes where customer acquisition actually gets that information and then passes it along through our work management system to the field? Or is it where our field gets on site, or our field or our work management or our dispatching gets the information, verifies, and then gets the work assignment out to the field? Or is it when the field's out there and they actually verify, yes, it's that green tag process has been completed? So I think there's a lot of whatever decisions made on how the notifications comes across, we'll build out the business process. It just needs clarity on that piece.
So one of the things that was just raised was, what if, if the utilities were able to search for by address per permit system to check permits, would that work? So you get a request to come out and energize, and you have, the list of where, for this particular area, here's where you go to log in to see, or not even to log in, to search to see whether there's been a permit pulled at that address and an inspection improved. Does that work? I mean, it seems like it would be probably a time savings over the number of times you send people out and find out that there is no green tag at the site.
I think it's doable. Like I said, I think on our side, it's just a business process on who does actually, because probably wouldn't have my field personnel pulling that information constantly. It'd probably be the bandwidth. Lacey's not on her, Lacey Garrett, so I can follow up with her. I assume there'll be notes or she can listen to the recording, but just if we have the bandwidth internally in the back office side to do that. But you're right, it could save a lot of work on the downstream process for the field. So it's just how we bake that in, right, to our procedure. So I think it's doable.
Okay. so I guess we floated kind of, in terms of the green tag, we floated a number of different ideas, and let me see if I can or the green tag notifications, both with PGE and with Northwest Natural and with the other utility providers. I think we've floated, let me make sure I've captured all of the ideas here correctly that we had. The first thing we talked about was potentially having, if inspectors are doing virtual inspections, them sending an email to the utility saying they've approved a site, approved and applied a green tag to something. We've talked about the idea of, if you're doing, say, video inspections, or maybe for all processes, the ability to apply, kind of have the customers be applying what is an effective virtual green tag approval. Do I have that correctly, Jonathan, as your idea there?
Yeah, correct.
Yes. Okay, and Matt also, yes. We have the potential idea of the utilities having access to either read-only access to people's back office, or like just the website access, which I know would be adequate on e-permitting, to be able to search an address and find out whether a permit has been pulled and the inspection that has occurred on a particular location, again, to save the time of going out to energize or put in a meter without having that verification. I think those are the things that we've covered there. Have I missed anything?
Not one that
think
you
you
missed.
have. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, one thought for the 2025 concept is, obviously emails work great, but especially we'll use Northwest Natural unless they give us different email addresses for each municipality or something to use. It's going to be cumbersome, to say the least, for the amount of inspections they're going to get in a day. It may be better to look at, since really all of our permit tracking systems are just a pretty user interface for a database, is to set it up so we do an XML or a CSV data dump that just goes somewhere. That way they can upload it to their database and set it up so it's just a reoccurring thing at midnight or something like that, so they know the next day.
So to pull, basically have some kind of report that pulls all of these specific types of inspections and forwards them to the utility, in a spreadsheet kind of format, so that they can upload those into whatever work order system they have.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think we'd have to probably figure out, timing is everything, right? To get that work out the door. And so depending upon the time of year, the resources available, things like that, I think we'd want to work through that process to figure out, like you said, when that data dump would occur, the expectation to fill that request. It might be worthwhile. I don't know. I don't know the next steps really. I heard about September, but maybe working through some of the scenarios more in detail, just to see, make sure we have all the right folks on our side, a PG side and stuff, Cascade, make sure we're not missing anything or there's any gaps or something in the process.
Yeah, I think we can, after this, we will put together minutes from this meeting and then kind of think of, figure out what the next steps make sense to be. Is this all something that we, look to including in what's an e-permitting system or comparable need to look like in 2025, and does that system deal with this, and how does it deal with these handoffs or communication between the utilities and building departments? So
yeah, cool.
Did we miss anything, or did anybody else have anything to add on to that? Okay, I think we have one more slide. And I'm not sure that this changes anything. But,
no, I kind of covered this in my recap of how we handle the field side of things.
Okay.
So.
And nothing in this equation changes anything in terms of the communication. It's really all this. Really, it seems like for both PGE and for Northwest Natural, we've kind of flesh through the different potential options and scenarios. And it really is just a matter of well, not just, but it is a matter of figuring out what is going to be the best kind of standardized form of way of getting the information about inspections to jurisdictions, and then potentially also making sure, hopefully we can also have resources, educational resources from both PGE and from Northwest Natural and other utility providers that could be provided on building department websites to help with this, help contractors be aware of the process. And then potentially also reminders on the building department side of things, on the electrical side of things, some reminders about what the process should be looking like for using those emergency waiver forms. I miss anything, or do we have any other things or concerns that folks have?
I think so.
Right, then I think I'm turning it back over to Terry to wrap things up.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to go through the next steps. We are going to have, it looks like maybe this group will come back together after we go over the meeting summary and talk about the highlights that Selena just went over. So maybe be looking for a meeting invite in the next 30 to 60 days. Does that sound about right, Selena? Okay.
Find the unmute. I think that works. Sure.
Okay. All right. Maybe even 90, because I have a lot on my plate right now. So, and it is 30, 60, 90. Okay. So I will send out a survey or potential dates, and you can let me know what works. And then again, I just wanted to remind you of the RAC coming back together in September to go over. We have 3 surveys. We have the building official survey, the design professional survey, and the contractor survey. And we did receive lots of survey information. So we'd really like your participation in that. And we'll go over the meeting summaries and then start putting together next steps. So we should probably have this meeting, Selena, with everyone before the RAC meeting, probably, right?
If it's possible. I mean, it's hard this time of year with people's vacations to be able to coordinate everybody's timing. We'll make sure that we get the minutes out as quickly as possible, look at what the options are, and then figure out a date. I think it could be fine to have it after the next full RAC meeting also, because we could just report back to the RAC what we came up with and then kind of go from there. So.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Please stay cool out there today and this afternoon and the rest of the week. Okay. Have a good day.